something you probably wouldn't expect about me based on the kind of content I make is that I genuinely love weightlifting. I love the gym. I love the process. I love the idea of building yourself physically and mentally at the same time. Because at its core, that's what the gym is supposed to be. Self-improvement. But like anything rooted in discipline, when it's taken too far, it stops being self-improvement and starts becoming self-destruction. Bodybuilding sits at a very strange intersection of that idea. On one hand, it's admirable. It represents dedication, control, consistency. On the other hand, at its highest levels, it barely even looks human. If you've ever seen a professional bodybuilding stage, Mr. Olympia, for example, you know what I mean. These aren't just muscular people. They look like something engineered. Like the absolute upper limit of what a human body could possibly become. And in a way, that's exactly what they are. Because while hard work, diet, and genetics all play a role, there's another factor that's been quietly shaping the sport for decades. Steroids. Now, that's not exactly a secret. But it's also not something that's always been openly talked about either. And more importantly, it hasn't always been this extreme. If you go all the way back to the origins of bodybuilding in the late 1800s, the goal wasn't to become as big as possible. It was to become aesthetic. To look like a statue. Men like Eugene Sando modeled their physiques after Greek and Roman sculptures. Symmetry, proportion, balance. They didn't look superhuman. They looked ideal. Attainable, in a sense. You could look at them and think, with enough work, maybe I could get there. And that illusion matters because as bodybuilding evolved, that illusion slowly started to break. By the mid-20th century, the sport had shifted. The silver era introduced the foundations of what we recognize today: wide shoulders, narrow waist, clean lines. Bodybuilders started to look like superheroes, and then, during the golden era, the 60s and 70s, that image exploded into mainstream culture. This was the age of icons. Charisma, presence, larger-than-life personalities, and physiques that seemed almost perfect. But this was also the point where something changed behind the scenes. Steroid use became not just present but expected, not necessarily talked about, not necessarily understood by the public. But embedded into the foundation of the sport. And that created a quiet disconnect. Because to the outside world, it still looked like hard work alone, which meant millions of people were now chasing a standard that wasn't entirely real, and they didn't even know it. Then came the 90s, and whatever line existed before was completely erased. This was the era of mass monsters. Bigger than anything that had come before, denser, leaner, more extreme in every possible way. At this point, bodybuilding didn't just push the limits of the human body, it started ignoring them entirely. Body fat percentages dropped to near survival levels. Muscle size reached proportions that looked almost unnatural even to trained eyes, and the only way to sustain that look was escalation. More compounds, higher doses, more risk. And for the first time, the consequences became impossible to ignore. Not just internally but visibly. Distended stomachs, altered facial structures, signs that something deeper was happening beneath the surface. But even then, the machine kept moving, because by the time we reached the modern era, bodybuilding had found something far more powerful than competition stages. It found the internet. Social media didn't just grow the sport. It multiplied it. Now, instead of a handful of elite competitors, you have millions of people exposed to these physiques every single day. Influencers, transformations, natural claims, unrealistic timelines. An endless stream of bodies that all seem to say the same thing: this is normal. And if you don't look like that, you're behind. That's where things start to get dangerous. Because for a lot of young people, especially guys, this becomes the standard they measure themselves against. And when that standard isn't achievable naturally, it creates something deeper than insecurity. It creates distortion, a feeling that no matter how much progress you make, it's never enough, that you're never big enough, never lean enough, never there. People call it bigorexia, not a clinical term, but a very real mindset. And when that mindset meets easy access to information, to substances, to online validation, you get a feedback loop. Take more, grow more, get more attention. Repeat until eventually your body starts to push back. And lately, we've been seeing exactly what that looks like. Young influencers, rising figures in the fitness space, burning out, breaking down. Or worse. And the most disturbing part isn't just that it's happening, it's how it's being received. Because in many cases, it's not discouraged. It's rewarded. Views go up. Engagement spikes. Audiences grow. And slowly, without anyone really saying it out loud, the line between discipline and self-destruction starts to blur. At some point, it stops being about health. It stops being about longevity. It even stops being about bodybuilding. And starts becoming something else entirely. Something performative, something addictive, something that looks a lot like people sacrificing themselves for attention. Now, to be clear, lifting weights isn't the problem. Bodybuilding isn't the problem. Even the existence of enhanced athletes isn't the problem. Problem on its own. The problem is the environment that's been built around it. An environment where extremes are normalized. Where honesty is optional. And where the algorithm rewards the most dangerous behavior. The gym should be a place where you build yourself up, not a place where you slowly destroy yourself trying to meet an impossible standard. So yet train hard, get stronger, look better, be disciplined. But understand what you're actually chasing. Because if you don't, you might end up chasing something that was never real to begin with. And by the time you realize that, it might already cost you more than it was ever worth.